Hi, welcome to TYT Interviews. This is Wes Clark Jr., and tonight I'm joined by Dianna Cohen, co-founder of the Plastic Pollution Coalition, who's also a multimedia visual artist and is sitting with me tonight.
Hello.
Welcome, Dianna. How are you?
Thank you. How are you?
I'm good.
Wow.
I'm good. Now, before we get into plastic pollution, let's get into how you got into plastics in the first place. What was your first interest in plastics in life?
So we have to back up in time.
Okay.
I'm graduating from art school at UCLA. I'm studying painting, primarily focused on painting. And I begin to do some work that's collage-based. And I'm working with brown paper bags that I can get from the market, cutting them up, deconstructing them, connecting them back together. And I begin to use a needle and thread as a kind of drawing tool to stitch some of them together. And at some point, I received this bag from a botanical pharmacy that has a botanical image of a plant printed on the side of the bag with the Latin name. And I think, wow, this is so interesting. Like, what a strange conflict to see an image of a bag with a plant printed on it. There's just something really incongruous about that to me. So I cut up part of that bag and I sewed it into a piece I was making out of brown paper bags. And I went, oh my gosh, plastic. Plastic is like this it's a miracle material, right? I think a lot of people remember the scene in The Graduate with Dustin Hoffman where the older gentleman says, son, I've got one word for you, plastic. And plastic is this total miracle material. I think a lot of people don't realize that it's made out of petroleum, which is an important thing to note. In fact, it's made out of a part of creating oil and processing petroleum that was probably a waste product originally until chemists figured out that they could add other chemicals to it and make it hard and solid and supple and malleable and transparent, translucent, and color it and make different things out of it. And it allowed us to really move into a different phase, which is creating all these things that were very lightweight and durable, or somewhat durable. So I digress. But anyway, with my artwork, it was just one of those moments for me where I thought, this is really an interesting material. It's a much more loaded material than just working with the paper. I thought the paper was interesting because it came in so many different brown colors and had strange text and font and numbers and things printed on it. And when I deconstructed it, it had patterns. Sometimes the edges of bags are like, have these jagged little bits. Anyway, so then I began to deconstruct plastic bags and realized they too had interesting shapes on them, things printed on them, text, font, language, images of animals, again, of trees and plants. And I found that really ironic. So I began to use that more and more in my pieces. And I was making kind of very square-shaped pieces, really thinking of them as paintings, so rectangular and square, and framing them in boxes for some time. And then one day I thought, well, why am I limiting myself? I mean, I could do anything with this material. So I started using the handles. I started making larger three-dimensional pieces that I could suspend from the ceiling, sculptural pieces that you could walk inside of. I made a 25-foot-long piece for the opening of the Ben Maltz Gallery at the Otis School of Art and Design here in Los Angeles, and it just began to progress in this way. So I would say after about the first 8 years of working with the material, some of the pieces I was making, some of the bags that I had chosen began to fissure and break into smaller pieces. And that's a quality that I actually really like in like old Dutch master paintings. When you see oil paintings that have a lot of layers with different kinds of varnishes on them, but maybe something hadn't dried all the way, and I used to do this when I was working with oil paints. Something doesn't dry all the way, but you put another layer on top of it, and you'll end up with this cracking and fissuring look. And so I kind of got excited about it, and I thought it was interesting. I thought it also meant that the plastic bags were ephemeral, like us. So originally in college, I was a biology major. That only lasted about 2 years because I needed to be creative immediately, and they were not allowing me to be as creative as I wanted to in the sciences. So I transferred to the art department. And what ended up happening is this kind of full circle return to needing to understand some different scientific properties about the material that I was working with. So I started looking into it, and simultaneously to having this experience through my artwork, I also grew up here in Southern California. I've spent a lot of time in the Pacific Ocean. I've also spent time in the Mediterranean Ocean, or off the coast of Hawaii, different parts of the world. And over the course of my life, I've begun to see more and more plastic at the beach, in the water. And originally what I would do is every time I'd see it, I'd grab it and pick it up, tie it to my bikini, come out with a bunch of it, find a garbage can, put it in the garbage can, or look for a recycling receptacle, but really there are none on the beach.
Yeah.
So at the same time that I was having my own experience with my artwork and working with this material, I was also having this physical experience in the real physical world of coming in contact with this material. So this was all kind of happening on a trajectory at the same time. At this point, I'd been working with the plastic for 27 years, making artwork out of it, and have had very good fortune so far, good luck to have been able to show it in galleries and through the U.S. Art and Embassies program and in museums and foundations in different parts of the world, in different countries. And what ended up happening is it was only about, I'd probably been working with the material for almost 20 years, about 18 years, when I began hearing about something called the Great Pacific Garbage Patch. This idea that there was an island, I'm going to say an island like this because it's not a physical island, but an island out in the middle of the Pacific Ocean somewhere. I actually know more about it now. It's called the Northeastern Pacific Gyre, and it's a naturally occurring wind and current system, but it is collecting in the center of it, over approximately 2,000 square miles, a lot of debris.
So 2,000 square miles of plastic debris in the middle of the ocean?
Well, not necessarily just plastic. It would be other debris as well, but primarily plastic.
Okay.
A lot of what they're finding is plastic. And in some parts in the more concentrated areas of the Great Pacific Garbage Patch, they're finding a very strange, like the percentage between plastic and plankton is 7 to 1 or 12 to 2. I mean, it's of pieces of plankton. I mean, pieces of plastic, excuse me, pieces of plastic to pieces of plankton. So it's a problem. And then I guess it was about 8 or 9 years ago, I started developing what I thought would be kind of an extension of my artwork, which was I wanted to get a cargo ship and 2 decommissioned fishing trawlers, a cold molding machine, a crane, and a chipping machine. And I was talking to these brothers who had a company in Utah who could chip up to 50% organic matter, because everyone I spoke to said, well, if you go to pick up the plastic or clean up the plastic out of the ocean, it's got organic matter living all over it. Mm-hmm. And I've now seen microscopic images that have been taken by different scientists that I know and some scientists at Georgia State University, where they're really going in and expanding the way that you look at the surface of the plastics that we're finding in the ocean, and they can have colonies, they have diatoms growing on them, larvae from lobsters, shrimp, all different, they basically are colonies. They're these they become these kind of vectors. So if you do get little clumps of it or a lone object that's out floating in the ocean, it potentially is a vector to transfer, invasive species or who knows what from one place to another on the plastic. So really they can have more than 50% organic matter. And I wasn't sure that this chipping machine was actually going to be able to work. And I was thinking about cold molding them and making bricks on my cargo ship and then transferring these bricks back to land and using them as a building element. So this was this whole,
and
project.
This is around 2000?
Yeah, this is around 2007.
Okay.
And so I started talking to a number of other people who had actually either been out to the gyre studying it, or were marine biologists or had had some interaction with what was happening with plastic in the ocean. And after conversations with a number of them, it actually made me realize that I needed to stop and back up and look at the bigger picture of the whole thing. And the bigger picture is, how do we stop this stuff from getting into the ocean? And not only how do we stop this stuff from getting into the ocean, how do we back up even further and stop this stuff from getting into us? Because as I began to learn more about the material, it turns out that the chemicals that are used to make plastics, again, primarily derived from petroleum, from oil, the chemical additives that are added to this to give it the qualities we associate with being plastic, or the plasticizers, are chemicals, a group of chemicals called bisphenols. You may have heard, oh, this has BPA in it, or this is BPA free.
Yeah,
so
I have
bisphenols.
heard that.
And then phthalates, which are another group, it's a whole group of chemicals, and usually only listed on products as fragrance. There were a lot of times they're not required to list what the chemical makeup of packaging is.
Okay.
Even if it may have a relationship to the product that's held in it. So
a packaging could be poisonous and outgassing, and they don't have to tell you.
Right.
Okay.
So basically, what's been found now in a number of studies is that bisphenol A, and specifically bisphenols, not only bisphenol A, but bisphenol A replacements, BPB, BPC, BPZ, BPN, BPS, are equally bad, if not worse, to bisphenol A, and that micro amounts of these things leach into the food and beverages that we package in plastic. And these chemicals, specifically bisphenol A, which has been studied the most, has been linked to a number of different health issues in human beings, including obesity and diabetes, lower sexual function, sterility and infertility, breast cancer, brain cancer, and prostate cancer. And in a low-level experiment that was done with rodents, when they did the necropsies of the rodents, they found that they all also had liver lesions, which is liver cancer. Exposure for babies in utero has been linked to shortened anogenital distance, smaller penis size, feminization of boys, early menses in girls, and lower IQ.
And this is all from not only BPA that we're warned about, but any plastic packaging that is made that's non-BPA?
Well, you can't say that it's from any of it. I don't know. I mean, I'm not a scientist, but in studies that have been done with bisphenol A, there have been links between exposure to that chemical. But a lot of times it's in lab animals that the tests are being done on, but these lab animals are mammals, and we are mammals. So,
Clear connection.
You decide.
No, I'm deciding. It makes me think about every baby bottle a child is given in this country that's plastic and heated up, usually by a parent in boiling water to heat it.
Out of love. By the parent who's feeding their baby.
And they're feeding their baby something poisonous.
I'm fairly certain I was a baby like that.
or even the packaging that most of the formula comes in is all plastic.
Well, I mean, and then there's also polystyrene, and it's been shown in tests that polystyrene gives off a neurotoxin. And yet, as an alumni of UCLA, I went back there recently for some events that we did over the last 5 years, and I went to North Campus where I used to hang out, and they're serving all the food and all the hot coffee and drinks in polystyrene containers. I'm hoping that they've changed that by now. But I mean, I was a kid who grew up eating those styrofoam kind of cup of soup things where you could really, if you think about the flavor of those, you can taste.
They actually still serve it in that cup of noodles.
Well, so, and then, I mean, I've heard people say, I meet more and more people now who have some awareness that, for example, plastic bottles, if they're out if you leave them in your car and they get hot in the car, that they may leach some kind of chemicals into the water or the beverage that's in them. But I mean, where were those bottles before they were delivered to you? Were they in a giant shed, in a cargo container, on a hot train, on a hot truck?
Maybe for weeks.
Weeks or months? Were they shipped on a container from, I don't know, Fiji or France
Fiji
or who
is
knows?
shipped from Fiji.
Yeah, so
and it's in a plastic bottle the whole way across the Pacific Ocean.
Right, and I mean, and then when it was delivered at the market that you bought it from, did it sit out on a pallet in the sun outside for a while? I mean, who knows? Who knows? So it's not really just a question of, did it get warm in your car? It's like,
it's already been heated up multiple times.
Well, who knows? I mean, who knows?
I can tell you they're not using refrigerated cargo ships to transport bottled water.
Right. I mean, look, here's the thing. All we can do is take whatever knowledge and information we have, and then we have to make some educated decisions based on that. I'm reading a lot of this every day, and it's enough to make me do my very best for myself and my family to try and avoid it. Granted, it's totally tough. I travel a lot, I eat out. If I walk into the kitchen anywhere, if I'm in airports a lot, who knows? I mean, it's been really great to see a lot more airports and public spaces adding filtered water or hydration stations or a spigot to the back of their drinking fountains and just augmenting them a little bit so that people can refill their own bottles. It's really fun when you see a counter on something like at Terminal 2 in San Francisco, and you can go fill up your own reusable cup or bottle. I carry reusable cups with me all the time on planes. I find if I'm not on a long flight, I won't fill up a bottle, but if I am, I will.
As we're on the subject of this, you brought in this metal straw that you gave us here, so we don't have to use plastic straws, because now that I think about it, we also give our children plastic straws to drink almost everything out of. Any child that eats in a restaurant, they give them a covered cup that's made of plastic with a plastic straw in it to drink out of.
Yeah.
Every restaurant in LA.
Yeah, so actually there's an interesting movement afoot. I mean, I'll back up for a second, because with Plastic Pollution Coalition, one of our projects is called The Last Plastic Straw. It's actually a partnership with one of our coalition members that now we've developed into more of a partnership. And what we've been doing together is creating short format video pieces, sometimes with kids who, I know my nephew made one of them because he felt really strongly about it and he wanted to make one. But with kids talking about how it made them feel. There was a video that came out earlier this year made by some scientists at Texas A&M. They were off the coast of Costa Rica and they were tagging a sea turtle. And it had something wedged in its left nostril, and they took a little sample of it and tried to figure out what it was, and then they decided they should pull it out. They were a couple hours, I think, off the coast, and they were forbidden to bring the turtle back to land. So they removed it, and it was about that long. It was something like a 4-inch plastic straw that had become wedged up in the turtle's nose. So a lot of people started making their own kind of homemade videos about how that made them feel. And what we did is we created a protocol with a number of our other coalition members, which is just whenever you go to a restaurant or a cafe, when you order a drink, say, may I have an iced tea, may I have a lemonade, no straw, please. I usually say, no straw, please. Please don't put any plastic in my drink. And then sometimes people will ask you why, so it's an opportunity to tell them why. But I'm seeing kids do it, and it's super cool to see kids do that, because straws are really, look, I carry a straw because I like to drink iced tea and I like having a straw once in a while. I don't use it all the time, but I think it's such a simple teaching tool. And as we're a coalition, there are several different companies that make beautiful reusable glass straws that are, clear, so they come in different colors. There are companies that make paper straws that actually break down and you can brand them. You can make them for your kid's birthday. You can make them if you have a company or a restaurant or a shop. You can brand them with your logo. They come in striped colors. They're really sweet. And now there are 2 companies that have joined our coalition that are growing real straws. One is being grown out of rye wheat.
Oh, cool.
Which is where straws apparently came from. And that's 100%.
From the stalk.
Yeah, the stalk of the rye.
Yeah.
And apparently it's safe for people who are celiac and have gluten allergies. It's fine.
Perfect.
And they're 100% biodegradable and natural, so you can use those. And that's where straws came from. So very simple little things like that. I think with a kind of shift in consciousness, and then encouraging businesses or cafes or places that you frequent, or maybe at your school or cafeteria if you're a student, encouraging people to change the protocol even of what they offer. So no longer automatically give people straws, but have them available only upon request. And I think what we've found with companies that are part of our coalition, some of the restaurant groups have found that they've had a marked reduction just by changing their protocol. So no longer automatically serving a drink with the straw.
I think they'd save money on it too.
Yeah, they are. They're saving money.
For me as a parent, I'm just thinking about what you said. I'm thinking, well, I remember IKEA was selling these, you would literally plastic balls to use as ice cubes, as reusable ice cubes.
Oh, I know.
This was like 5 or 6 years ago. And I'm thinking, wow, millions of people in America took plastic and they put it directly in their kids' drink to drink, as well as every ice cube I've ever made in my refrigerator is with a plastic piece. We're surrounded by it.
We're surrounded by it, and look, in all fairness, I helped a girlfriend of mine host 2 Tupperware parties like about 12 years ago. And I was like, oh, and every once in a while, I'll have that moment where I'm not thinking about this fully because we're so surrounded by it. You know, it's ubiquitous. It's everywhere. I'll be, let's say, at a museum gift store, and I'll see a group of nesting bowls in rainbow order that are made out of some like hard, dense plastic, and I feel like I'm Homer Simpson. I'm like, oh, so beautiful. I must have. And I start going towards them, and I kind of touch them, and I'm really attracted by the colors. I mean, that's part of what happened for me making the artwork too, is plastic bags come in this amazing array of colors, right? So really attracted to it. And then all of a sudden I'm like, I'm gonna snap out of it. What are you doing? You know, I certainly don't need them. But what I've had a fun time doing just for myself and my family is, especially at secondhand stores and vintage stores and thrift stores, is collecting these older Pyrex pint, half pint, quart, you know, kind of bowls, and some of them are baking. They're oven to refrigerator or refrigerator to oven, and they come with a glass transparent top. Some of them are kind of milk glass with a color on the exterior. They come in red and blue and all these beautiful colors, bright yellow and green. And so I'm always keeping my eyes out on, peeled for those, looking for them, and I store the food at my house in those or in glass jam
Pyrex
jars.
is okay, because I've got some of those bowls too. And I'm
no,
like,
glass is fantastic. Ceramic is fantastic. I mean, you probably don't want to use, you'd want to check and not use like a white kind of lead-based ceramic. But I think people don't use that. It'll say it's food safe when you buy things if they're newer. So obviously you want to use things that are food safe. But ceramic's great. Glass is fantastic. Wood, bamboo, food grade stainless steel. This is food grade stainless steel. Steel is great. So steel containers that lock down. You can get little lunch boxes and things that are all different sizes, from Steely's drinkware to Clean Canteen to there's a website called Life Without Plastic. I mean, there's all kinds of great places where you can find, people are already
I'm still
vetting
thinking
these
about
products.
this whole, like, everything that's in plastic is ultimately poisonous, and then I'm thinking about every microwaved meal I've ever had that's in a plastic tray that I'm putting in a microwave that has a plastic film over it
No,
to
you don't
pull
want to eat
back.
that. No.
I mean,
It's funny because when I started learning all of this, so it's just really in the last 8 years, 9 years, I've been slow on the get-go, like to get my own messages from my artwork. Like in the beginning, I was taking plastic bags all the time because I thought, oh, this is a cool plastic bag and I'm going to make an art piece out of it. But then probably after about 8 years or 10 years, I started thinking, I don't need any more plastic bags. I have tons, and other friends and artists are saving them for me and sending them to me. So why don't I just start rehabituating myself, relearn bringing reusable bags with me? So like there are really cool tiny little ones like Chico bags. Makes these one that fold up into nothing. They have this mini Chico or micro Chico that you can just tuck in the corner of your backpack or your purse or your man purse or your satchel.
I don't carry a man purse.
Whatever you got. You can tuck it in the corner. Or, we go out to things now and people are given a canvas bag at something. Just remember to put it back in your car, or keep it on the back of the door and use it on your bicycle or, whatever when you're walking. I keep them just kind of all around me so that I don't forget to bring them. And, sometimes if I forget, I don't buy very much, or I end up carrying everything out of the market, like in my shirt, or I'll ask them for a box, a cardboard box. I mean, there's a lot of ways around it until you teach yourself to bring that reusable bag. And it's funny because
And it's hard to teach yourself to do that, because I forget that reusable bag every single time.
Yeah, but if you began to think it was really important and dapple them everywhere in your life so that, even if you walk into the market, as you're walking in, the trigger gets earlier and earlier. You go, oh yeah, my bag, it's in the cart. You go back and grab some bags. So, I mean, it's just it's relearning stuff. It's good for your brain.
No, it is. It is. We so seldom use our brains today. But so you saw it. You saw the danger for it, and you said we have to do something about it. What have you all done in the Plastic Pollution Coalition?
Okay, so we came together originally. We had our soft launch in the end of 2009. We were originally 4 co-founders, and we spent weeks chewing on what we should call ourselves, and we finally decided, and this is partially due to a guy who's a great mentor to all of us named Captain Charles Moore, who founded Algalita Marine Research Institute, and he is a person he had traveled through the Great Pacific Garbage Patch and was like screaming and yelling as loud as he could about it, and a bunch of us heard him. He had been at a meeting with us at Google, and he had said, it's really important to call things what they are. And this is kind of a longer conversation because I think it has to do with this whole idea of climate change as well.
It does.
Who added the word debate onto the end of climate change? It's not a debate. It's happening all around us. That was very clever. That's very clever marketing. In the same way that the BP oil disaster was not a spill. I've spilled things before. That was not a spill. That's a disaster. So we decided, well, we're just going to call it what it is. We're going to call it Plastic Pollution Coalition. It's a really long name. It's hard to say. You have to practice a lot. But we're going to just call it what it is. And we are going to begin to grow an alliance or a coalition of many, many different diverse groups and businesses and individuals who are all looking at the same problem, but maybe coming at it from different perspectives, different points of view. So when we began, I think in the first year we grew to about 100 groups that were part of the coalition, and we're now 7 years old and we're over 500 businesses and NGOs. And many thousands of individuals who have joined us. We have about 60 notable coalition members, and the first notable coalition members to align themselves with our work were surfers. And to me, surfers are like the front line. They're in the ocean almost on a daily basis, and they are seeing plastic pollution up close. And they were very much aligned with us initially. Then the next group of people that joined us were chefs. So people who are thinking about food and preparing food and looking at our food system. And then we had slowly musicians and actors and actresses. And we've had a number of chefs, a number of authors and filmmakers join us as well. And just slowly kind of growing. I was really proud, I think it was the second or third year of our existence, I think it might have been 2010, I got an email from the Teamsters the same day that the Girl Scouts of America contacted us. So they both joined the coalition.
Because everybody thinks Teamsters and Girl Scouts
don't really mix. Right. So, but they do, and the reason they do is because the Girl Scouts were doing a Green Girls Forever, movement where they were getting lots of different Girl Scouts to make a commitment to bring their own reusable bag and reusable water bottle. And they actually had a counter on their site where they were documenting that. And the Teamsters have been working on this Clean Ports initiative to try and create a healthier environment for the Teamsters who work in the Port of Los Angeles.
Because they're handling plastic all day long.
Not just for handling plastic, but just what you're exposed to. So they weren't only looking at plastic. They were looking at people, stopping their idling of trucks and just different things that you could do to create a healthier environment for people to work in.
I got to say, as a parent who has children who celebrate Christmas, I would love to see them get rid of all those plastic ties that are on top of these things. There's like 50 for every toy that's that big. They're all over them. I mean, the packaging is this big, the toy is that big.
Yeah.
And what happens to that packaging after I throw it in the garbage? Where does it go?
I think
what
most of it,
to
recycling in the United States is not very efficient. It's not really happening. And it's happening a little bit, but our recycling rates are low. Germany has very high recycling rates. Granted, it's a smaller area that we're looking at than the continental United States. But according to the last figures that I saw, we recycle, I think, less than 11% of all of our plastic bottles and less than 22% of all of the plastic that we're using. So what happens to the plastic that we're not recycling? That's ending up in landfill or being shipped on cargo containers to other countries or being incinerated. And there's a big push right now by industry that the solution to the plastic pollution problem is waste to energy. And this is really concerning or of concern because when you incinerate something, you create particulate pollution.
Absolutely.
So people who live near incineration plants suffer from higher levels of asthma and all different kinds of health issues. So I don't think it's a good solution. It's a great solution if you're coming from industry because you don't have to change one thing about the way you do business. And, I mean, it would really be much more interesting to see these big companies, I'm going to say, Coke, Pepsi, Nestle's, Procter & Gamble, Unilever, really look at ways to take back all of the packaging that they use. And I think that probably as citizens, we need to encourage policy and legislation and regulations that will enforce that or make that, status quo. Because without extended producer responsibility, which is holding them accountable for their packaging, they don't have any incentive to change.
That's true. That's true. There's no incentive at all. I read this study last week that by 2050, there will be more plastic in the ocean than fish.
By weight.
By weight.
Yeah, it's the Ellen MacArthur report.
And I think they're assuming that, the Chinese aren't going to actually pull all the fish out of the ocean by then. They're going on weight from today's fish.
Right.
Versus like how few there will actually be at that time.
Right.
And of the fish we eat, there's plastic in their stomachs, it's going through their systems,
Yeah.
they're metabolizing these toxins.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's been some great work done by Chelsea Rockman, who's a scientist who's been looking at when fish do eat plastic or microplastics or microbeads or microfibers, which are washing out of our clothes, et cetera, when they do ingest it, there is a transference into their flesh of the chemicals that are either used to make the plastic or are attached to the surface of the plastic. There's been a wonderful study, ongoing study by Professor Hideshige Takada, who's at the University of Tokyo in the School of Agriculture, and people have been mailing him these little tiny balls that are called nurdles, or it's a pre-consumer plastic pellet, basically. They're also referred to as mermaid's tears. So people mail them to him and they tell him where they are. And he basically, with his students, does a geolocation of where it's found, and he tests the surface for pollutants. And what he's found is that one tiny little piece of plastic can have up to 1 million times the persistent organic pollutants attached to the surface. And then they look like fish eggs. So everything in the ocean that would eat fish eggs is ingesting it. But that means it's attracting all the other organic chemicals that run into the ocean, and that includes pesticides, pharmaceuticals.
So it's like it's a poison magnet that's floating around that's about that big, and the fish goes, God, look at that delicious poison magnet.
Yes.
So not only is he eating all
the
the
fish
plastic,
doesn't know it's a poison
but everything
magnet.
else that's stuck to it.
Well, the fish doesn't know it's a poison magnet, and
He thinks it's lunch.
And if we eat fish, we're not thinking, oh, this fish has been eating plastic and might have absorbed some of the chemicals from the plastic or stuck to the surface of the plastic, and now it may be transferring into me. We don't think about that.
No, we don't. It's because because we think, oh, everybody else is doing it, it must be okay. So we don't conceptualize that there's an actual danger.
That's a much longer conversation.
That is a much longer, and that's also related
I'm happy to come
climate
back and
change.
talk about that. Yes, it is. It is. And so anyway, I went on to a tangent, but
okay.
So we co-founded Plastic Pollution Coalition in 2009 with this idea that we wanted to call it what it is, Plastic Pollution Coalition. We've slowly grown a lot of interesting groups. There are a number of groups that they're looking at the human health impact. I'm actually speaking here on Wednesday. Fran Drescher is doing an all-day summit, the Cancer Schmancer Health Summit, and I'm speaking on a panel with Ed Begley Jr. and Ken Cook. He's the president of Environmental Working Group. EWG is part of our coalition, so is lesscancer.org, Keep a Breast Foundation, Non-Toxic Revolution, the Breast Cancer Fund. We're also working on a study right now in partnership with Child Health and Development up in Berkeley, looking at and developing ways to communicate with people and help them create a healthier, more environment which has less single-use and disposable plastic in it. So basically reduce their exposure to chemicals from plastic.
Wow.
So it's pretty cool, yeah.
I'm thinking back to when I was younger and we used to actually still write things with pens, how many pen tops I chewed and just chewed to nothing.
Yeah, but we all did that.
I know, but I did not realize I was ingesting plastic.
Do you read any science fiction?
Of course I do.
So, I mean, the thing I love about science fiction is, in a way, we are bionic. In a way, we are living in 2016, and we clearly have a pretty decent threshold in our bodies. We are evolving, and we have this threshold to be able to handle a certain amount of environmental toxins because we are ingesting them. We are, they are all around us. We're cleaning our house with chemicals that are toxic for us. We're exposed to this stuff all the time. We're breathing it. We're potentially bathing in it. And so in a way, I feel bionic's maybe not the right word, but I mean, kind of superhuman.
We're evolving so that those who will die of cancer sooner are taken out of the gene pool, and the people who can tolerate more plastic survive.
Well, I mean, one of the bummers is that groups that work on their focus is the cure as opposed to prevention. I mean, I'll tell you this is an interesting statistic, or not a statistic, but a statement. So a friend of mine named Dr. Margaret Cuomo, and she's one of the founders of lesscancer.org. She's a radiologist. She got up about 3 years ago. I was part of a panel at the Capitol in Washington, D.C. on February 4th, which is it's National Cancer Day. And that day, to begin the panel discussion, she had bipartisan senators come in and with a proclamation and announce that they were also deeming February 4th to be Cancer Prevention Day. And we all kind of cheered and clapped. And the focus of this panel was to talk about prevention versus cure and just identifying the illness. And she said something really great when she opened it that's always stuck with me. She said, based on what we know right now about exercise and nutrition and exposure to environmental toxins, we could reduce cancer by 50%.
That's a huge number.
It's a huge statement. And I mean, not to go deep personal, but this is personal for me. It's personal for me and my sister and my family because when I was in junior high school, my mom was diagnosed with breast cancer and she died when I was in high school. Yeah, me too. I'm sorry for her because she was a great person. But the kind of cancer she had was estrogen receptive. We now know that many cancers are estrogen receptive. And these chemicals we were talking about at the beginning, phthalates and bisphenols, are estrogenic. So they basically get in our bodies and they mimic estrogen. They mimic kind of a synthetic estrogen. And they basically feed cancer. They feed illness. And, obviously we didn't know that 34 years ago whenever my mom was ill, but we know it now. And if we know it now, what are we doing about it? Is
Nothing.
The question. No, we are.
You are.
No, there are people who are doing
things. But the government
things.
isn't.
Well, the government
and
needs to do. The government needs to do more, and industry needs to be forced to do more.
I agree.
Yeah.
Now, are you guys behind? Isn't there quite a few anti-plastic bag initiatives on ballots this November?
Yeah, there are. Actually, there's a really important one coming up right now. So anybody who's at home voting in California or voting by mail for California, we have two propositions right now. It's really important. One is it's very, very important to vote yes on Prop 67.
Okay.
And Prop 67 is to uphold the California bag ban. We passed it into law 14 months ago. Governor Jerry Brown signed it into law. And then out-of-state plastic bag companies spent $6 billion gathering signatures to basically block the implementation of our plastic bag ban.
Wow.
Thank you very much. And tangentially to that, they spent a lot of money putting another proposition into the vote as well, which is Prop 65. And on that, we have to vote no.
Now, what does Prop 65
say? So Prop 65 basically says that they want to, it sounds like something that environmentalists or someone who don't know what it is would say, oh yeah, this sounds right, yeah, yes, but what it is it's creating a fund so that markets and businesses that already were implementing the bag ban, so basically offering reusable bags for sale and not buying plastic bags and offering them to their customers, now have to take any money that they raise from selling those reusable bags and put them into a fund. And it's a little bit, put it into a fund. I don't know exactly what that fund is supposed to go to, but it's an industry-backed bill. And so we're encouraging people to vote no.
No on 65, yes on 67.
Big yes on 67.
Big yes on 67, big no on 65.
Yeah.
And we're kind of reaching the end of this here.
Already?
We are. We've been blowing through the time. But what you're doing is incredibly important, and so few people understand the dangers. You know, I'm at that age now in my 40s where an incredible number of people I know are coming down with cancer.
Wow.
And,
That's young.
It's young.
Yeah.
I've had the women I know all started to, the ones who came down with it started coming down with breast cancer in their late 30s.
Yeah.
And it is accelerating, and each year, as you approach 50, more and more and more people are getting it, because so many of these things, it's not instantly poisoning you.
No.
It takes its time, and the damage is already done.
Well, I mean, there are also studies that are being done with third or fourth generation cohorts, which show that we are transferring things literally from our DNA. So it's like the way that allergies are becoming, much more widespread. It's like we're weakening each new generation by exposing our exposure and then compounding that and passing it in utero.
Wow.
Yeah, it's awful. But I mean, the thing is, as far as I know, I have one life. We have one life. So you do the best that you can. And when you get new information and you learn something new, you adjust your course. So I think the important thing is to stay really open and want to learn more information about things. We've been creating a knowledge base on our website. Should I share our website?
You should share the website right now.
Okay, so our website is plasticpollutioncoalition.org. And on that website, under resources, we actually haven't even announced it publicly yet, but it's there, is a lot of information and resources about films, books, how to educate yourself, peer-reviewed scientific studies, places you can go, simple things that have been created by different coalition members. One is how to start a bag ban in your town. Another one is how to start a polystyrene ban, which is styrofoam. And there's been this big movement also with a lot of young people and kids to phase out plastic straws. So that's slowly gaining momentum right now. There's a lot of interesting stuff and content there. Something we've had a lot of success with has been this project called Refill Revolution with the Bonnaroo Music and Arts Festival. It's about 90,000 people in Tennessee every summer in the beginning of June. And they started something as a very small pilot with us, but we've been scaling it up every year, which is pre-selling a special reusable cup that's just made and colored and decorated for that year, with a neoprene strap and a carabiner so you can hook it onto your jeans or your shorts or your backpack or your purse. And then every time you use that, you get $1 off on every beer, but you can use it for water too. And they have free water.
Oh, very
and
cool.
People are camping for 4 or 5 days. So it's really,
cool.
And they figured that just in the first 3 years of our program, they've reduced plastic cups and plastic water bottles by 1.5 million. So that's what we've saved.
And
just
we can
so
just
far.
keep replicating that and replicating
yeah. I mean,
that.
and
And
it started
replicating
small. We started with 7,500 steel cups and 13,000 steel water bottles. And we're talking an event that has 90,000 people. So, my dream is to see music festivals and events and all events that we go to using real stuff and incentivizing people using real things.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much for
You're
joining
welcome.
us tonight, Dianna. I got to say, it's been a real pleasure, and I hope we can save some lives and help change the world together.
I hope so.
I hope so.
Yeah, woo.
Thanks for watching TYT Interviews, and we'll be back next week, tomorrow, tonight, whenever you happen to be watching it. Have a good night.